And we're live. Hi everyone, this is Damage Gamer, and then we're returning to AG's Old War tutorial series, and we're moving on to tutorial 7, Training. Training is this shield with crown on top next to Civics. And while Civics is seen kind of like a domestic thing that you're using to develop your empire, training is used for military. It is used for pretty much just military, or at least its main contribution is military. And if you lack this, you're gonna have a hard time fighting wars, especially early on. So, with your training, what it's used for is for a number of things, right? Your city will produce a certain amount of training. And what happens is, depending on how much training your city produces, it will determine how many turns will be needed for you to produce your units. For example, a warrior costs 60 training, so with only 10 training per turn, you need 6 turns to produce that. And it is interesting how all of these units have their own source to pull from, so you might have growth to get any of these units very quickly, but if you're lacking training, these guys are going to suffer. So training is needed to produce units, and just like civics, they are generated by the city and they're added to this nationwide pool, and it also has a cap of 2,000. So just like civics, you better use your training or else it's gonna go to waste. And some of the uses for training is under production, for hurry production. So you have civics, but you can also use your training. And in addition to that, you also need training for promotions. So as you can see, minus 100 training allow you to upgrade this unit to get one of these promotions. So as you can imagine, without training, you're going to have a hard time making your units better with promotions, and that will usually result in you losing wars, because if your opponents have better quality and same quantity, they are more likely to win. But of course, it is AI, and some human players will probably prove me wrong, but generally it's a good idea to promote your units. And early on, training is also useful in that you can use it to buy order. You can spend 100 training to get 1 order. And that is very important when it comes to war, because whenever your units move around, they need to use up order. And if you run out of order, it means that your units can't function effectively, because maybe not all of them have done anything. So that's why if you have a high training rate, you should be able to supply it at least until you're able to buy order with money. Until then, training is basically your main source of getting extra sources of order immediately for whatever situation you need it for. And like growth, when you are building your units, you're using up the training. So if I cancel this, so right now you'll see plus 18, and now you'll see plus 28. So like growth, where your unit uses up all of your growth so that your city is not growing, when you are building military units, you are not getting the training. So once again, there is a downside of constantly building military units because your training will not be increasing as much, and when it comes to war, you might need a few extra order, but you won't be able to afford it because you don't have the training available. And like civics, you also have certain things that require an upkeep of training, so you can actually get negative. And as you can imagine, just like civics, going negative is generally a bad idea, especially if you have neighbors that prey on your territory. That's when you don't want to go into the negative. Now, speaking of civics, I also realized that training and civics have one thing in common in how you can get a fair amount. There's something called training boost. So what happens is when you get the Botkin arrow, so this is a technology, then you're able to get this to grab this. I'll discuss permanent trash when discarded in the future. That's for technology. And just as you have something for training, you also have that for civics, where you get 500 civics available to, if you choose to research this after getting architecture, then you'll be able to get that boost. So that's another source that I didn't mention in the last video for the civics. As for training, there's also a base value, and there's also hunters. I don't remember hunters. Alright, hunters is the family that we picked. So the family cities, you get +2 training per year. Right, I totally forgot about that. You gotta remember that I don't record all of these in one go, so over time I forget what I did initially. I'm using basically the same save for these tutorials. I don't know what I'm gonna change, maybe once I cover other topics. But yes, in addition to your base value and your family and your training boosts from technology, you also have certain improvements, and the improvements off the top of my head is the barracks. +20% training in the city where it's built. And then you have certain specialists. I'm trying to remember. I think it's the officer. Yeah, officer, +2 training per year. And, just as for civics, you have the stonecutter that is a specialist that's made available by quarries, both of which give civics. You have officers that are made available through barracks, and both give training. So there are certain paths, certain choices where you can suddenly get a fairly big boost to what you need. And just for those of curious, slightly off tangent, you have apprentice officers, and then you have elder, and then you have master. As you can see, they do get better. I mean, it should be apprentice, master, elder, right? You get more experience, more training, but that's for a specialist tutorial. And there are also certain civics projects, which, if I remember correctly, and if I can type, we have the Olympiad. So this is, I believe, only available to the Greeks. And yeah, it's only available to the Greeks, and you're able to. It is basically one of these, right? It's like, for example, we have the Hunt. They have Olympia that can increase their training. So there are certain civics projects that are available. And once again, we have Wonders, and I mean, Wonders are pretty solid. Like, if you're able to pick between the different Wonders, like pick the one that suits you best, that's ideal. But you don't always have that choice. So odds are you usually have to go with whatever you can, because Wonders are pretty powerful. Even if they don't suit you perfectly, they're usually strong enough that, and plus they're needed for victories, so they're pretty good. There's a pretty good reason to go for them. And there's also, once again, events where you can get single boost or bonuses every turn. And of course that's pretty random, so you're not guaranteed from those. But sometimes you do get some of those, and it can be, sometimes it might be timely. Sometimes you're like, oh, I wish I had it 5 turns earlier, right? And there's also governor. So just like civics, your governor can have an impact on the training of your city. So that is something else you have to watch out for. And that just about covers training. Well, I just say it. There's a tad bit more, because training can rush production like civics, but it can also get you more order. And yeah, like civics, it can cap out, but definitely have, in my opinion, more regular uses. Civics, not as much, because civics is kind of limited to how many cities you have and what tech you get, because if you don't get the technology, you can't pick these laws. And there's also the religion, whether or not you have unlocked that yet. But both of them are important. But one is definitely for war, which is training, and the other is for more domestic matters, which is civics. And you will notice that something else that I just remembered is for civics and training, there are sometimes trading events. So you met another nation and you're on good terms and you might be trading. And sometimes civics and training might be one of those resources that's getting traded, right? You're like, I'm gonna give you civics for stone, or vice versa, whatever. So those will also affect the rate at which you're gaining these. So that's something else to pay attention to. And unlike something like culture, I don't think there's anything that you can harvest with your scout to give you training. I could be wrong, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anything like that. So anyways, I am going to end the video here. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you have a good one.